Hello and welcome to JLF London's 2020 Curtain Raiser at the British Library in partnership with the Aga Khan Foundation, UK. For the past 6 years, we've gathered in London to celebrate words, listen to brilliant conversations, and reconnect with so many of our wonderful friends and guests, and raise a glass or two, more likely three or four. And then COVID took over our lives and brought everything to a screeching halt. But where there's a will, there's a way. And we did not want to miss the chance of celebrating a weekend together. Please join me in welcoming festival co-directors Namita Gokhale and William Dalrymple.
Dear friends, we truly treasure our JLF London editions at the British Library, and we are delighted to present them in an engaging and interactive digital format. Our collaboration has been full of learnings and synergies, and I'm there in spirit with the British Library team for this run-up for our September festival. The early amphibians learned to evolve and adapt as they moved cautiously from water to land. We too are learning to cross over to virtual spaces to augment our physical and material ones. It's a journey that the pandemic has pushed us to. I'm curious to see where the accelerations in technology take us. But whatever the platform, storytellers remain the custodians of our collective memories. The sanctity of the word remains the enduring foundation of human culture and civilization. The British Library itself stands testament to the power of words and narratives, of archives and textual knowledge. The ability to name and interpret, the capacity to transmit learnings about ourselves and our environment has enabled the evolution of our species. So I'm truly looking forward to listening in to filmmaker Mira Nair as she talks to festival director Sanjoy K Roy about the vocabulary of cinema and her career from her iconic debut film, Salaam Bombay, all the way to Vikram Seth's Suitable Boy. JLF festival favorite Peter Frankopan will speak of the Silk Roads with my co-director William Dalrymple. Then, on Sunday, Nobel laureate Venki Ramakrishnan will be in conversation with director of the Science Museum, Roger Highfield, on how to follow the science through the confusions and the contradictions of our time. I'm also looking forward to speaking to the director of the Nehru Centre London and mega-selling author Amish Tripathi on myth and memory and India's living epics. Do view these wonderful sessions that we have lined up for the 6th and 7th of June and share in the depth and intimacy of these very special conversations. Thank you for being with us. Namaste.
Hello, my name is William Dalrymple. I am one of the co-directors and co-founders of the Jaipur Literature Festival, and it's my huge pleasure to invite you to JLF London 2020. Sadly, of course, this is going to be online rather than live this year, but it still brings me huge pleasure to bring together the two streams of my writing life. I've lived half my life in London, working in the British Library, researching all my 4 company and mogul books there, and obviously live in Delhi and Jaipur. And to bring these two bits of my life together is one of the great pleasures of the year. This is always a favorite week, bringing people like Peter Frankopan, one of Britain's greatest historians, into confluence with a filmmaker like Mira Nair, or a great Nobel Prize winner like our great favorite Venki. So welcome to this fantastic event. We'll be back with a full program in September, but for the moment, this is an all-star curtain raiser, and we hope you enjoy it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Namita. Thank you, William. The British Library has been our much-loved home for JLF London over the past 3 years. Please welcome Roly Keating, the Chief Executive of the British Library.
Hi everybody, I'm Roly Keating, I'm Chief Executive at the British Library, and warm greetings to you all from a sadly empty library building. The building may be closed, but we though are proudly open for business, for conversation, for partnership, and none more so than with our great friends Namita, William, Sanjoy, and the whole team at Jaipur Literary Festival, with whom we are delighted once again to be partnering on JLF in London this weekend in a little bit of a taster session, a special weekend with just a sample of some of the digital talks and conversations so characteristic of this wonderful international festival that so reflects both global conversations and the amazing collections we hold here. So please do enjoy the weekend. We are very, very proud to be a virtual part of it. And we're looking forward also a little bit later in the year, in September, to be co-hosting with JLF an even richer sample and selection of talks then. So we hope, as well as enjoying what happens now, you'll be back with us then. But for now, please enjoy all the sessions and have a wonderful time. Thank you.
Thank you, Roly Keating, and your colleagues Jamie Stewart, John Conrad, and B from the British Library, and our supporters, the British Asian Trust, British Council, and the LSE South Asian Centre. JLF London has been scheduled for 11th to 13th of September 2020. Our first session today on JLF's London at the British Library is from Salaam Bombay to a Suitable Boy, Mira Nair in Conversation. Award-winning filmmaker, Mira Nair talks about her cinematic language, the vocabulary of the moving image, and her special affinity for literary adaptations. Here she discusses her work, her world, and her motivation. Mira Nair is an award-winning feature film director. Her debut feature film, Salaam Bombay, garnered over 25 awards, including the Camera d'Or at Cannes, and was nominated for the Academy Awards. Her successes include Mississippi Masala, Monsoon Wedding, which won the Golden Lion, Vanity Fair, The Namesake, The Reluctant Fundamentalist, and The Queen of Cutway. Mira Nair has recently returned to her roots in theatre with a musical version of Monsoon Wedding. She's also just completed directing Vikram Seth's magnum opus, A Suitable Boy, for the BBC. Ladies and gentlemen, from Salaam Bombay to Suitable Boy, Mira Nair. And please do remember to comment and ask questions by typing it in the comment section. Mira, somebody just sent me a message saying that she looks so glamorous in the creative that we had put out. And there you're looking glamorous right now. Where exactly are you?
I am fully an unsuitable girl in my suitable home in New York City, in my cocoon, in my study, from where I've been actually post-producing Suitable Boy for all 6 hours of it, right here in this book-laden study for the last 3 months.
But you got out of India right on time, right? When did you finish shooting? Because you were shooting pretty much through Christmas.
The timing was extraordinary. December 17th, we finished shooting in Lucknow. And December 19th, one of our actors, Sadaf Jafar, was arrested on the streets for peaceful protest. So I was in India, of course, through the protests and through most of early January, but then moved to London, where I worked, in Soho, starting the editing of 6 hours. It's a mammoth task. And just as it happened, in March, came to see my son, Zoran, here in New York for 2 days with a knapsack on my back from London. And it was in those 2 days that the world really changed. And I just followed my instinct and never went back to London. So my house or sort of apartment is still there in London, but I got back to my own home where I have lived here for 20 more years. And luckily, Mahmood, my husband, Mahmood Mamdani, came in from Uganda, where he was teaching 12 hours before Uganda shut down. And so finally, we are here together working and in our cocoon, but it's a very focused and strange cocoon in a certain sense, because we just work for 10, 12 hours a day, remotely editing, post-production, mixing. We just did an amazing experiment with a 30-piece orchestra in Budapest who recorded our score for Suitable Boy. Our composers are Alex Heffies and Anushka Shankar. And you can manage to do all this really with a set of headphones and number of devices. So we haven't missed a beat, but we're really focused, and about 2 months from completely finishing 6 hours of A Suitable Boy.
Well, what better place to be shut down than Riverside Drive? I mean, your apartment is just absolutely gorgeous. I love being there. But Mira, tell me, how different has it been doing like a series which is 6 hours long? Is it completely different the way you pace the film or the cinematic language of it? I mean, how did you sort of manage to do that?
Well, I have a lot of help, but I have to say that I don't think of it as anything other than cinema. The craft of cinema, the rhythm of cinema, the most exquisite kind of nuances of cinema, for me, that is not different from what I'm doing for television at all. The difference, I suppose, with television or with the luxury of 6 hours is that you can really see a story unfold, and nothing is more appropriate for this form than A Suitable Boy, because it is a multi linked ensemble, which of course I love. All my films are really ensembles, because I believe the circus of life must be our stories forever, because we are always interconnected and interlinked, even these days. But anyway, so 6 hours. And the extraordinary thing was also working with the great distiller of huge tomes, Andrew Davies, who is the screenwriter of A Suitable Boy, who really distilled this massive book into these 6 hours, first into 8 hours, and then I worked with him and the team of the company, which is Lookout Point in England, to really whittle it and condense it into 6 hours. So it's been extraordinary, in a way a learning, but the act of rhythm, juxtaposition, propulsion, those sort of essence of the craft of how to tell a story is still the same. But it's been a real joy, for me to work with 113 extraordinary actors, all from India, which is BBC considers radical, because it's the first time I think they've made a series that is cast and produced and directed and all that entirely in India, as opposed to from abroad. And that's for me is a great treasure. I love actors. I am an actor. I begin to think of people. I cast people off the street. I cast a legend opposite them, whatever. That whole world to come alive with Suitable Boy has been a real joy. And since I live a lot in Delhi as well, I've been casting this for 2 years. Any restaurant I go to, I'm casting. It's like a little bit like that. So it's been a real joy in that sense, to bring together a fabric to do justice to Vikram's extraordinary book.
Mira, I'm going back to the question, what you talked about the BBC, even maybe a decade ago, for an international film body to sort of look at doing a film like this, they would necessarily always first look at a white director, white producer, and never perhaps risk giving it to an entirely native group of people. Are you seeing this change? Are you seeing a change both in Hollywood, because you've been working there for so long, but also in the UK, which has always quintessentially made films from a very white perspective?
Well, I always say, when they talk to me about how radical it is, I just always say it's about time you woke up, But yes, I am seeing a small change. Sometimes it comes, I think, with a shaming, and I think this movement that I'm seeing, thankfully, around me, Black Lives Matter, for instance, which is 5 minutes outside my door, the protests are rising, and they're everywhere. There's no longer just in Washington. It's like 100 cities today. It reminds me so much of what I left when I left Delhi. The protests against CAA was so are public and for anyone, and not just one clique or another. It's the same thing that we are feeling now, and it's hugely changed even after Me Too here in Hollywood, in terms of how much there's a kind of proactive towards just having there be equity between men and women in our industry. But yes, with Black Lives Matter, with all this that's happening, I see definitely a waking up, but I also see a waking up to the ability that our part of the world has constantly shown. if you look at our series, I mean, I'm looking at Patal Lok like right now, and it's riveting. And I mean, if you look at the quality and the complication and the art, in it, it's a very they have no leg to stand on when they don't look at the rest of the world to especially make the stories that come from within us. It's changing very slowly. I think every moment of these kinds of big series that have the oomph of what they know, like I used to jokingly call Suitable Boy a crown in brown, and that's what I meant, is that we're not going to tone it down. It's going to be magnificent. It's going to be sweeping. It's going to be intimate. It's going to be funny. It's going to be shocking, and it's going to be extremely timely. It's not any different in scale from the mega epics that we see here, except that it is about who we are. I remember when I came back from India a few years ago here, and I saw Game of Thrones was a sensation, and I turned it on. And honestly, the sort of what I call the beige aspect of it, the fact that it was completely white and completely beige and completely blonde, was actually offensive to my eyes, and we have to stand up, and we have to actually sort of tell our stories in a way that will never let you go, and that you see essentially through its authenticity, perhaps, the universality in them.
And you said this in the beginning, the unsuitable girl making the suitable boy.
Well,
The fact that it's a woman's gaze, is that sort of radical? Is it different? I mean, how did you come to this particular film? And how is it going to be different from your perspective as, the unsuitable girl?
Well, I was saying unsuitable because, it's been almost the third year running, and I'm like now dreaming of my unsuitable life before, because I'm like possessed in it, and I dream of other things now. But it's, Vikram has written very beautifully and complicatedly and affectionately, and not easily, about Lata, who is our protagonist and the center, and he was reminding me that strangely or beautifully, this whole Suitable Boy is almost being made completely lots with women. Aradhana Seth is, his sister is one of the producers. Lydia, my producer of all my films, more than 30 years, Lydia Pilcher is producing it. There's just the amazing female characters in it, and the actresses that I have, from this beautiful newcomer, Tanya Maniktala, who plays Lata, who's from Gurgaon, and Shahana Goswami and Geeta Agarwal. And I mean, I have, Rasika Dugal, anyone that I have loved, Vikram has pretty much written a role for. And it's really a rich and beautifully affecting universe. I wouldn't, for me, it's not so much the woman's gaze as the gaze of knowing North India, of knowing my people, loving my people, and also not letting people disappear in our story. For instance, there's an extraordinary character whom I kind of identify with a lot, even though I'm not religious, Mrs. Mahesh Kapoor. She's really not even given a first name, who is this sort of silent, devoted gardener, somebody like me who is involved with trees and plants. And anyway, she's this kind of spine of the family who doesn't say much but keeps it all together. And I noticed that Mrs. Mahesh Kapoor was never really a vocal character in the 8 drafts of the story. She did not turn the story in a way that I loved, and in the book. And I also remembered that in the Hindi translation of Suitable Boy by Vikram, it was translated by Ram Gandhi, and I noticed that Vikram dedicated that novel to Mrs. Mahesh Kapoor, and I knew then that how important she was to him as she was to me, and basically wrote in this character and fleshed her out and gave her several scenes, and really made it come alive. It's that kind of perspective sometimes, that I would bring to it, so that there's a democracy that is preserved, and also that highlights other things. Things happen for other things. Everything is related. So it's in that way that I would bring my own, view of things to it. The other thing that I feel that I didn't want to make a museum piece. I didn't want to make a period film in that sense, that it felt like a museum piece long back there. Apologies to the British Museum. No, this is the library, so I'm fine. But, and I find the politics of the novel. This is 1951. India is being created. It's our first democratic election. But the politics of that time, the way Vikram has written it, I mean, he basically brings back the Babri Masjid idea early on in our story. And the politics of that time are so resonant with the politics of today. The seed of what we are feeling and struggling against now, and the obliteration, for instance, of, say, Urdu or any of that, was written at that time. The seed was planted then. And for me, it was very important to make Suitable Boy feel like not just a mirror, but that what we are going through now has its roots here, and to question that at every moment through our story. So for me, that is very important, as much as it is a female gaze or my gaze, really.
The other thing sort of that's always played parallel to much of your career has been the politics of big studio versus your independent film, a mission that you've always had. Tell us the difference, Mira, because I know you've always sort of, big studios have thrown these magnificent projects at you. And in many cases, at one level, you've sort of said, okay, maybe, and then you run for cover and you've gone back to doing what you do best, the Salaam Bombays, the Queen of Qatar. Tell us a little bit about Hollywood, big studio, and how you see yourself as not just a director, but pretty much also as the ringmaster of independent films.
Well, I am fiercely independent, but I'm also a team player, which is what you need to do when you make any kind of film or any kind of work that involves collaboration. I just preserve my energy, because making a film is years of your life. You have to inhabit and want to inhabit that world. I inevitably make choices to make films or stories that are politically important to me, So that is actually most of the reasons I shun the studio work, because I don't shun it always, but I ask myself the age-old question, can anyone else make this story? And if they really can make this story, they should make the story. I make the films, like, why did I make Vanity Fair? It's a huge $50 million studio film. I made Vanity Fair because Thackeray told a story that really resonated with me. He told a story. He was born, as we know, in Calcutta. He left India when he was 14 to become an English gentleman, but he always saw his society from the point of view of an outsider. He always saw, for me, Vanity Fair was not only the tale of Becky Sharp rising from rags to riches, it was the tale of how the colony, how the empire was raping the colony and bringing the treasures from the colonies to create a new socially mobile, upwardly mobile class that would create a Becky Sharp to rise in that society that was plump on the spoils of India. That was the angle I loved, So for me, it's about preserving that point of view, and preserving a point of view that is distinctive and true, and a point of view that people can just completely put away and tell the other tale, So for me, it is that really, Sanjoy, because life is short. Life is so bloody short, and you have to do what you must do. I'm not here to just fill my days with busyness, peddling wares that come from anybody else's consciousness. No, that's not for me. There are many others who would do that, but I think, like to do things like with Suitable Boy. My birthday happened while we were shooting, and apparently I got I raised a toast and I said, thank you. I would I don't know what I said, but I said something like, I'd kill anyone else who want to make this film because I must make this, that kind of thing. I have to have that conviction that it has to be me to do something like this. So that's what I listen to. I have to listen to my instinct.
Your career in many ways has been peppered by two kinds of films. One is your love for literature and the adaptation, be it Namesake or Suitable Boy, etc. And then is the workshop, the workshop production, Salaam Bombay, The Queen of Katwe. For both of these, they obviously need two different kinds of craft. Can you just sort of tell us how different it is to do a Salaam Bombay as opposed to do, say, a Reluctant Fundamentalist stroke, a Suitable Boy?
Well, the original screenplays, with the case of Salaam Bombay and, well, Namesake is an adaptation, but Salaam Bombay and Mississippi Masala, the great partnership is with Sunita Rapurwala, the writer, and she and I really share a worldview and share a wicked sense of humor, and we've grown up together in a way. And so there's a very beautiful shared sensibility. And in those earlier films, Salaam Bombay and Mississippi Masala, it comes out actually out of my documentary training as well, of recognizing the most extraordinary thing about life is it's infinitely more powerful than fiction sometimes. It is so inexplicable and extraordinary, I think. And learning that through first cinema verite, first documentary filmmaking. I made a film, India Cabaret, 1984, where I lived for months with strippers in a nightclub in Ghatkopar in Bombay. And I understand through my camera and through my trust or communication with these, with Rekha and Rosie, the women who danced, and the men who came into the club and their wives who stayed home, I sort of explored this triangle India style, the ménage à trois in a sense. What is the line that divides good women from not so good women in our society? And so observing life like that and creating drama really out of that drama gave me the courage to go into it in a fictional sense. And why fiction? Because I wanted more control over the frame, over the light, over not just hitting and running, which you often have to do in documentary. So Salaam Bombay came out of Suni being in Bombay, my being inspired by street children, she sharing that, us literally living, hanging out, trailing 4 months of a gang on Grant Road, and then inventing a story both out of her imagination, what we had seen, my take on it, and creating a screenplay. And then bringing it to a gang. As you know, I started in theater with Barry John, with Theater Action Group in Delhi in my 70s, in the 70s. And I knew the form of how to bring theater together in a workshop situation, and brought that together, and then emerged really making, I hoped, an authentic, a truthful film set on our streets, but with the people who really lived those lives, but amalgamated them with a few actors that you would not know are different from the kids you see. Sort of this vocabulary of mixing non-actors, as they call them, with actors is something that in hindsight, I've continued almost in every film. With Denzel Washington in Mississippi Masala, he'd already become a star opposite Sarita Chowdhury, a fantastic girl I saw on a bicycle, and I've done that a lot of times, even in Suitable Boy, right? And it gives me a great excitement to put the purity, you could call it, or the lack of artifice of somebody who's never faced the screen opposite somebody who knows the tricks. It forces a kind of, I call it the barometer of truth that then I can work with. So that's what I started with. But I've always been a literary person. I mean, I was thinking when I was, growing up in Delhi University, the big things were these book fairs we would have. The Russian books would come in, 2 rupees for Tolstoy, 2 rupees for War and Peace. Literally, the first money I ever spent was, I love Dylan Thomas, and like sending off to Wales for all 21 manuscripts of his that had been published. That was my fuel, is books as much as anything else. So, and in the early years, I remember being so excited by P. Lal, this publisher in Calcutta, who published these beautiful hand-loomed books of Indian writing in English. In fact, Aman Nath, a good friend, just sent me my first poem published by P. Lal. I'd even forgotten, in 1974. So, I loved it, but when I read the other literary so-called, the classics, it was always Tom, Dick, or Harry. It was never Bhaskar or Avinash or Ashok, And I remember the incredible excitement when I first read Dom Moraes, when I first read Ved Mehta, when I just thought, this is where I come from, Anyway, that propelled me. And later years, my God, the fiction has been so rich, such a solace to me and such an inspiration to me. When I read Jhumpa's, The Namesake, I didn't read it to make a film of it. I read it just because it was there. And it just was like as if I had a sister in the world, It possessed me. It captured something. And that's when I follow it. And then that's when I want to devote years of my life to making that. With The Reluctant Fundamentalist, Mohsin, I had this extraordinary trip in Lahore where my father came from. And I remembered in 2005 when I went there, it was such a shock of familiarity and love, complete, all-encompassing, incredible love from anyone I spoke to, simply because I was from India. It was very moving. And I said, my goodness, I want to make a tale about contemporary Pakistan. And then, as much as at home as I am in America, when he wrote The Reluctant Fundamentalist, it really spoke to me because it was our, Jack Kerouac wrote On the Road, but this was our On the Road. This was a brown boy, from Lahore, as educated as you or I are, wherever, and who makes his way in the Western world and actually rules it until 9/11 happens, and then he's suddenly a Muslim in their eyes. And how does he navigate that? That's an essential question, and that has never been made into that was never a film. I had never seen that film. So it's that kind of when I'm captured, and I have the permission and the blessing of the author to go on a journey, it's exciting, it deserves the telling, so it's like that. It's a mix of what tale one can tell oneself and what is already there for me to kind of, just sort of get into.
The other thing that everybody looks to your films for is, of course, the color, the burst of color. And there's always this wonderful spectacle, whether in Salaam Bombay it was the Ganesh procession, or as the Vanity Fair is the big parties, etc. But it's also that attention to minute detail, whether it's Chai Pao's trouser or the way she wore her necklace or the costumes. You really are very, very specific about what you think will work for you. Tell us a little bit about how much of detail do you get into while creating a film?
Well, it's the great elasticity of the craft of cinema, which is that this craft itself is so all-encompassing that, I love painting, so I use painting. I remember a guy just chasing me on a street 20 years ago. He'd seen Monsoon Wedding. He said, I'm a painter. My parents did not let me be a painter. They don't want me, but I took them to Monsoon Wedding and look at the people, look at the Gaitondes on the wall, look at the, Jamini Roys, look at, I just thank you, because now my parents, it's a weird thing that happened, but now his parents could see that to be a painter was not so bad. But anyway, for me, it is like living in a cocoon finally with 2 years of crafting your story. I have to enjoy every frame, and I have to, and I do, I really feed myself with the arts, I really feed myself with aesthetics and color and craft and books and painting and the beauty and music, most importantly, music. And the most beautiful thing about cinema is that you get to use all this. And you get to use all this in a sort of hopefully imperceptible way that will then create this sense of a world that thankfully you're feeling. So I do get into it. I work with great partners. I've worked with the same roughly the same film family. Arjun Bhasin is my costume designer. He's been with me since he was 19 years old, since Kama Sutra, and he's done pretty much every film since then. So we have a great shorthand, which doesn't require much talking, but it requires, and actually great enjoyment. Or with Declan Quinn, my cinematographer, who's pretty much done a lot of work right since I began. And so I have a wonderful family, Stephanie Carroll, the production designer, and Mithwa Krishan, who's like a set decorator beyond belief. I mean, so I work with people who get equally moved or excited or committed to creating, making this world come alive. That's the joy of it, because God knows there's a hell of a lot of struggle, and there's always a real hassle with money and being just asked to do things for not much at all. And because I have love in me and passion like this, I usually agree, and it's never about getting rich, but so you have to at least surround yourself with those who take you further, and also those who enjoy it as much as you do, yeah, taste is vital.
I'm going to touch upon your theater. So, you started in theater with Tag and Barry John and so on and so forth. And now, in many ways, you've gone back. And this last version of Monsoon Wedding that I saw that you did in Delhi was so beautifully distilled. The music track was stunning. The performances were beautiful, but at the same time, so simple. The production was not over the top as you would expect of a musical of that sense. It was distilled, it was elegant, it was beautiful, it communicated love. You are now translating that or transporting that to the Roundhouse in London. It was supposed to open in 2020, but now you're opening it in 2021 in July. Tell us about that process of Monsoon Wedding, the film, Monsoon Wedding, the stage version.
Well, Monsoon Wedding, the musical, is now exactly almost 11 years old in the making. We started developing it literally 11 years ago. And again, I handpicked my collaborators, especially in Vishal Bhardwaj, who is the great composer of Monsoon Wedding, the musical. It has 21 new songs, some based on the soundtrack we all know and love from the film, but many are new because it's a musical. The story is propelled by song. And it's, you saw in Delhi, we did a wonderful sort of factory version at the Black Box in Okla, which I loved doing. It was a 2-month version to bring together an ensemble of entirely Indian actors, as opposed to, we opened in Berkeley in 2017, a major sold out, almost 4 months performances. And this was a sort of some actors from there, but many from here. And it was a factory workshop to see whether the revised version could work, and it certainly worked. And then we were moving it to London and opening it in a big spectacle way. It will be much more spectacular than what you saw. And then bringing it to India. That was the plan. And then COVID hit, and it was disappointing to us all. But, I think it's all part of the rhythm of things. And I'm actually, in some senses, grateful that I could just fully focus on finishing Salaam Bombay, Suitable Boy. You began this problem in my mind, from Salaam to Suitable, to finish Suitable Boy properly. But we are absolutely set to go with the musical of Monsoon Wedding. And fortunately, Roundhouse and Leeds in England, they both were so committed to it, and they were so disappointed that they immediately nailed us for next year, 2021. So we are opening in June in London, June in Leeds, and July 2021 in the Roundhouse. And we also have big plans to open across India and across the East and the Middle East. And that we'll do as soon as we understand from the powers that be where the virus will sit, in early spring, because we are ready to go. And we would love to open it, because it's been a long and heartfelt endeavor. And I really think it's more than about time, because, the West has their Fiddlers on the Roof. They all have their versions, but this is our version. This is the sort of the Punjabi, let's work hard, let's party even harder version. And it's really a version somehow like the film that gives you joy. And God knows we need joy.
And it touches you. And I remember you calling me to say, what do I do? I have to get suitable boy on the road, but monsoon wedding, and how do I manage both? But anyway, it all seems to have worked out. Mira, you talked about Berkeley, opening in Berkeley, and you're now back in America. But it is a very different America. It's a very different Berkeley, and Berkeley was always known as the place of protest, the University of Berkeley, etc. But that's now spread across the length and breadth of America. Do you see this to be a tipping point, a final tipping point? There's been so many points, Trayvon Davis, and all the place markers over the last 2 or 3 or 4 decades, where people have come out to say that this has to stop, but it hasn't. Whether it's been about gun laws or about Black Lives Matter, do you now see that this perhaps is a moment that could and will bring about change?
Definitely. I think that I feel it's the tipping point. It should have happened a long, long time ago, because these injustices are flagrant and have happened forever, really forever. But I think in the fact that there's not one march to Washington, but there are 100 marches everywhere. Hundreds of cities are having their own marches, and most of them are incredibly peaceful. I just woke up this morning to the governor of Washington, the mayor of Washington, writing Black Lives Matter across the streets, the same streets that Trump will have to ride on to go to the White House. I just was so energized by that, because, we cannot look away. We just cannot look away anymore. And I do hope, and I do think that just from the solidarity that I'm experiencing across civic life here and professional life, the music industry shut down on Tuesday. Industries are shutting down in protest for this. And that's extraordinary, without any other pressure but the pressure of the injustice of it all, and I feel like, but it also makes me think of India, and it also makes me think of Mississippi Masala. 30 years ago we did this. We made a film that showed our own racism within our own hearts, within the brown heart, against the Black person. It's right in us everywhere, And for me, that it's also what it recalls, is that this is not this reality only. We have our own reality, and we have our own reality in India that has a longer history, perhaps, than the racism, or equally long history as than the racism in this country. And that's what it makes me feel. I ask myself to translate this movement that is literally all around me to what it means in my own country. And it means that Dalit lives matter. It means Muslim lives matter. It means women's life matter. It means Black life, brown life, we matter. And we've actually always mattered. But that equation is also very clear in my mind, and the fact that it is easy to say it's happening over here and to forget our own. That's what it also makes me very much reflect on.
No, you're absolutely right. It's very easy for us to sort of, especially here in India, sort of look there and say, "Oh, look what's happening there," and sort of condemn the violence there, and join the "Let Me Breathe" movement. But the fact is, as you said, racism, dark people, fairer people, the skin creams that are available, the way we treat minority, whether it's religious,
those are the least of it.
or
migrant labor itself.
Atrocities continue every day. I'm sorry, Mira, we have to go to questions, and there's a zillion of them. So I'm going to bunch them together, because otherwise we'll be here forever, and my colleagues will start shouting at us. So Aruna Dasgupta asks, considering the way you dwell deep into characters, how many times did you read Suitable Boy before or while making the film? So hold that question. And then we've got, will a Suitable Boy be available for viewing release in India? Most BBC shows are not accessible to the Indian audiences. And this is from Shreya Sridharan. And one more on Suitable Boy is... yeah, I mean, take these two first, and I'll come back to the other.
Suitable Boy came out in 1993. I was one of those strange people who read it twice, back to back. And I just didn't want to let it go. It was like a best friend who you didn't want to leave. And actually, I consider it in some ways the maa-baap, the parents, the mother and father of Monsoon Wedding. At that time, I did not have the wherewithal in the late 90s to command the kind of money it takes to make such a magnum opus. So I thought, let me make my own microcosmic version. Suitable Boy is about 4 different families. Let me make a little version of one family that then became 2 families. And I remember giving also the book to Sabrina Dhawan, my wonderful, collaborator and friend who was a student at Columbia University Film School, writing this screenplay while I was teaching there. So in many ways, it was a parent of what became Monsoon Wedding. I've read that Suitable Boy probably once more since the late 90s. And in the course of course, adapting it with Andrew, I read it not cover to cover several times, but constantly. I'm still reading it because a lot of work, and when you make any film, is done in additional dialogue recording, and I'm always trying to juice it to the max. That's one of my phrases on set: juice it to the max. And so I'm still taking turns of phrase, and it's just a delightful book, and it gives me something pretty much new each time. And so yeah, I keep reading it if I need to. Bikram gave me a link that allows me to put one word in that I'm looking for, and that chapter comes out, and I can then read it economically. So yes, I've read it several times.
Will it be
Yes,
available in India?
For me, it is more important than anything that Suitable Boy is available across the subcontinent, and it will be. I don't think I can say it yet as to who will be streaming it, but it's a major, whatever they call it, platform, streaming, whatever. It's a major monster that's going to be streaming it across most of the world. And for me, this was the most important thing, is to get it out to India and to Pakistan, and to where I consider my soul
Where
is.
it's set. Where it's set.
Where it's set. And so yes, it will be streaming. I don't know if it's at the same time as the BBC. It opens on BBC at the end of July, but very soon thereafter.
2 personal questions, and I'll club them together. One is by Rachita Akhilesh Chauhan, who asks, when you get lost in the story with that conviction, how did you balance being a mother, especially when children are young? Are women taught to have guilt, especially when engaged in a world of their own? And another question from Sachdeva Ramakrishna is, you seem to like directing over other art forms. Any reason? And if you had gone to Cambridge instead of Harvard, what might your life have been?
Oh, God. Okay. The first one is about children, right? Well, for me...
Children and guilt and immersing yourself.
For me, I'm not a great subscriber to guilt. Life is, again, much too short. But I'm a great subscriber and believer and devotee of family. And I have lived and had the great privilege of living right through my married life with my in-laws, for instance. I spent 25 years with my father and mother-in-law, and my mother, who came very often when I had my son, Zoran. And for many years, I had this caravan of great people who were family, who really raised my son while we worked, of course with them. But so I always had that privilege, of keeping we have one son, but we have several children in our lives, but of keeping them in the family embrace really while work was happening. So I only chose to work less when we moved to South Africa in the late 90s, because Zoran started going to school and I couldn't just lift him up and take him to wherever I was shooting next with my caravan. But that was a huge help. The extended family, what we call the joint family, without my family, I would never have been able to work like this. And I would also probably have felt the guilt that I don't really feel that much because I had the support. And the second question after that was,
The
what was
second
that?
question is, should you have gone to Cambridge
Oh.
in the UK instead of Harvard? Would your life have been different?
I don't think, I mean, I got that scholarship to Cambridge when I was, 16, 17. But I just really had a big chip on my shoulder about the Brits, after the Raj. I always told my mother that if I was born before independence, I would have been an anarchist and I would have done something not entirely suitable. And I
I
just
thought
had,
you are an anarchist. How is it that you were going to be? I mean, hello.
Matlab, I am. Now I'm what should I say, acceptable anarchist. Then I would have, gone transgressed. So I don't know, firstly, that I would ever have considered Cambridge. But if I had, well, that's just I mean, I think, I think that for me, it was so strong to leave India, to be in India only till I was 19 years old, because my roots are really very strong. And that's why I felt I could fly other places. The difference in America, coming to America, which is the first country, I mean, I never left the country till I was 19. So my first encounter was with America, is that it felt much more open and less judgmental and less hierarchical and less sort of snobbish. Now, this is something that you see on the surface of things. In England, the racism at that time especially was much more palpable. Now it is much more, again, sophisticated or sort of, but so that was one thing that I do feel that I would but even in America, I felt like I'm not here to be only grateful. You're also here to know about where I come from. I always had that feeling, not to thumb your nose at it, but just to meet in a dialogue as opposed to in a hierarchy. And I wonder if that could have been the same if I had been in England as a young person.
Maruta from Boulder, Colorado asks you, did Vikram Seth work with you during the filmmaking? And if so, what was that like?
Yes, Vikram is also an old friend and my neighbor, and very delightful. And he, I definitely, when I had things that troubled me, that I wanted to really make sure that we brought in and did right, I saw Vikram and actually stayed with him for a few days in Salisbury in England to talk about the Hindu-Muslim question that I wanted to make very, very sure that I was being able to capture in a very nuanced way that would be timely and correct. I went to Vikram, and we wrote several scenes. We concocted together that he had input in, and it was very good, because I don't want to do. Why should I invent entirely new things when I have my author? So and even and of course editing everything, when we are finishing things, I send it to him and he tells me if things are off, or mostly they're not, but what a pronunciation here or whatever there. He loves music and is again, we make it, but he comments on it. So yes, it's a dialogue, but he's very respectful and very shall I say, extremely thankful about the quality of what we've done.
Rachita Akhilesh Chauhan asks, there's a sense of snobbery about not having songs in a movie. Some label it as an art movie. Isn't the blending of the poetry, music, and story taking it to a higher form? And why is this looked down upon? And I'm going to give you one more question. Tilotama Shom asks, when you create the script and screenplays, how do you flesh out the humanity of your characters? Because that's your special touch. Each character just hitting the spot in the heart of the audience and then directing the actor.
So, in terms of music and poetry, I completely believe with the person who's asked the question that music and poetry and song, especially from where we come from, is such a inextricable blend that really for me, really captures the emotion that is much deeper than text so often. And for me, that's vital. It's been like that through 30, 40 years of my making films. It was interesting with The Suitable Boy because at the heart of A Suitable Boy is Saida Bai, the great courtesan, played in our film by Tabu, who's equally legendary and extraordinary. And Saida Bai sings ghazal, and she sings the Daag and Mir and Ghalib, and and we have about 7 ghazals, that Kavita Seth has sung and composed.
In fact, she sent me a message just now saying that I've done these 6 songs, these 6 ghazals. So I said I'll speak to Mira about
7,
that.
beautiful, beautiful. And these are filmed as real as they would be in life, right? She would be singing, she would be performing, she'd stop, she'd have a pan, she'd sing again. She'd sing sometimes even while making love, So it's like a very inextricable part of Suitable Boy. And this was not so usual for the BBC. They said, what are these musical interludes, Mira? So I said, they are not. They said, is this a musical? I said, yes, it is. It is a musical. There is music that propels the story, and without this music, the character is not the character. The character's art and craft and breath and sinew is music, and so we have to have music. So we had the music, and then there was an interesting tete-a-tete that kept happening about, must these ghazals be subtitled? And for me, why not? I mean, why should one rob the ghazals of their meaning? Why should one rob songs of their meaning? That is
poetry. I mean, it's poetry.
And poetry and drama, all of it, a comment, a counterpoint, it's essential. And it was a real, it was a real going back and forth, and they finally were very graceful about it and let me have my way. But it's this inextricable heart of our work and of our storytelling, And I've always I said to them, I would not have made this if I were not doing it this way. I have to. And Vikram, of course, completely agrees with the same thing. And so we have a very incredible dimension, and not just of ghazal in Suitable Boy, but we have folk village song, we have Bhatiali songs, we have religious festivals, we have
the
real panoply of music and song in A Suitable Boy.
Well, I still remember the incredible soundtrack that Dr. L. Subramaniam did for Salaam Bombay. I mean, spectacular, every aspect of it.
And he did Mississippi Masala too.
Yeah,
he did Mississippi Masala too. Yeah.
The other question, remember, was about
Tilottama's question. So Tilottama is the incredible actress who played Alice in Monsoon Wedding long, long ago, and has just blossomed every minute ever since. There's no real, with working with actors, firstly, every shot for me has to have an intention that is clear. And if not one intention, more than one intention for the scene. So that focuses me on what I'm trying to get from the actor. I observe actors' strengths and their charms with great affection. And whenever I see things that I want to use, I create situations for them to use it, to use their skills. The other thing is creating a family on screen. So often, we have the most extraordinary casting directors, Dilip Shankar, and Nandini Shrikant and Karan Mali. I mean, I've been working with them now for 2 years on casting, correctly Suitable Boy. And we've cast families very much that look like each other, that look like they could be families. I mean, I remember when we cast Lata, Tanya Maniktala, and then I thought, who could play her mother that would look like, and then finally it was a light bulb, because Mahira Kakkar, a wonderful Indian actor who lives in New York, whom I had cast in Monsoon Wedding, the musical, it's like seeing a miniature come to life when you see her with her daughter, Tanya, So that, firstly, the casting creates a fabric for me first of who will work with each other, and then who will look like each other, and all of that. And then it's for us to create an atmosphere where we can literally play the fool, where we literally don't take any risk that we want. Here comes the workshop kind of ethic, how we did Salaam Bombay, how we did Queen of Katwe, how we did Suitable Boy. And we create this kind of sense of real family, real bond. And then then they are comfortable, I'm comfortable. And then when we go on to do these scenes, and we never have loads of time, we're always, racing forward. Then we have played the fool, we've taken all the risks we can get. Now we are ourselves and we go for it. I don't know if there are any more secrets to it. With each moment, of course, I try to get everything. But
Mira, I'm going to have to cut you off there because my colleagues are being hysterical.
Please,
But
please.
let's do a quick rapid fire because there's these 3 questions. Just say yes or no.
Okay.
The first is Suraj Dhingra says, which process did you enjoy more? Monsoon Wedding, the film, or musical? Rapid fire.
Musical.
Musical. We've got Rahul Sen asking you, do you like OTT platforms or not? Will your next film be a film for an OTT platform or a television network?
After Suitable Boy, I don't even know what OTT means, but after Suitable Boy, I'm making a film for myself, and then I'm making another big ass series.
Rajatri says, will the Monsoon Wedding musical in London be different from the one that we watched in Delhi in terms of the script?
Just a teeny weeny bit, maybe 10% will be revised. One song is new, 2 songs are new, but in its design, we're basically creating we're basically creating a tent. In its design, it will be different in the sense that it will have the spectacle that it always had to have, with the building of a tent and a tent coming down. Yeah.
Mira, thank you. We could have carried on as usual forever whenever we meet, and I hope we shall meet soon again. Mr. Parekh, yes, Salaam Balak Trust was a result of the film Salaam Bombay, and we created the trust to look after the street kids from Salaam Bombay, and of course from Nukkar, which was something that Barry John and I had set up pre the film, and that's how it was created. I'm sorry we couldn't take everybody's question. I also wanted to ask Mira about Zoran launching himself into politics. I think, Mira, you and Mahmood have done well that, Zoran has been fired up to not just be an armchair philosopher like people like us, but really go out there onto the street and say, I'm going to try and make a difference. And, best wishes to him, but maybe we'll keep that for a next time. We hope you've enjoyed this first
Vote for
conversation.
Zoran Mamdani as Assemblyman of Astoria, Queens. Local politics, that's the way.
Fantastic. We hope you enjoyed this first conversation of JLF London at the British Library, and we'll log back at 4:30 p.m. British Standard Time and British Summer Time, and 9 p.m. Indian Standard Time for our next session, The Silk Roads, Peter Frankopan in conversation with William Dalrymple. Peter Frankopan's Silk Roads, a major reassessment of world history, has sold over 1 million copies worldwide. Here he talks to William Dalrymple about the notion of the Silk Road and discusses why it's such an important concept today. Meanwhile, we now present a short extract from our music archives. Nirali Karthik is a Hindustani classical vocalist from Mumbai. Nirali's effort is to try to carry forward the tradition of Indian classical music in a way that relates to contemporary audiences across the world. Enjoy the music. See you back 4:30 p.m. British Summer Time. Thank you.
मृग नैनी हो यार नवल रसिया 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 मृग नैनी एनर्जी को एक्सेस करते हैं। तो ये थोड़ा आप महसूस करने की कोशिश कीजिए कि आपको कुछ एनर्जी फील हो रही है कि नहीं, अलग अलग फ्रीक्वेंसीज में। साउंड इज एनर्जी एंड वी आर ट्राइंग टू एक्सेस दिस एनर्जी। मारो बालम जी मारो बालम जी मारो बालम जी मारो झिर मर भर